hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Julia, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the fall of college. Now, I don't mean a literal downfall, right? Like, I'm not trying to say the entire institution of college is just done for and whatever, and everyone's done with it. Nah, that's not what I'm trying to say. However, college enrollment has been on the decline for the past several decades, and more recently, there's been a lot of closures of smaller colleges all around the US. So I really want to talk more about these school closures. I want to talk more about the declining enrollment in college and just how the sentiments around college have changed a lot over the years, and how Gen Z in particular has really been looking at college in a different light, and a lot of people don't feel like it's as necessary as it used to be. So I actually want to give a shout out to one of my subscribers, A Grace 2001. She actually posted this on my last video, this idea of talking about the decline of college, the future of education, and I thought those were really great ideas. So shout out to her, because I thought about it, but like I wasn't really thinking about making a video on it. It was more of like a passive thought. So thank you and shout out to her, and let's get into it. So college closings used to be rare, but now we have over 70 colleges closing since 2020. They've either closed or merged, and I believe about 20 colleges closed in 2024 alone. So these tend to be smaller, more private institutions that rely on tuition rather than endowments. And it's interesting because it's so weird, because I think about, when you think about college closures, you kind of think about like the big colleges, but it's really a lot of these smaller colleges. I actually went to a small private liberal arts college. And, when I think about it, I'm like, whoa, I can't imagine like my alma mater, like the size of my alma mater closing 20 more times. Like, that's kind of crazy to think about a lot of these small institutions consistently closing. And the Federal Reserve actually did a study that estimates that if this trend continues, we could have about 80 colleges closing per year. I mean, that's really a lot when you think about it. I feel like because these are smaller institutions, we don't always think about it, but that's actually a lot. So what are the reasons for a lot of these institutions closing so rapidly? So a lot of it has to do with limited enrollment. A lot of students are not enrolling in colleges as much as they used to. So for example, Notre Dame College and Fort Bond University, I believe, they literally lost over half of their student body over the past 10 years. They've literally lost like over half of what they used to have. So when you have that many institutions closing, you can't afford to keep the lights on, especially if you're not really relying on endowments, but just tuition alone. There's also a lot of financial mismanagement as well. So we actually have Birmingham Southern College. They nearly closed after miscalculating financial aid packages and depleting its endowment to stay afloat. Then there's other colleges like Union Institute University and Pittsburgh Technical College, which face allegations of financial misuse and misappropriating their funds. So it's like, when you mishandle your funds, when your business falls on hard times, you have nothing to fall back on. We also have rising operational costs, which is something that I personally barely thought about when it came to college, in terms of all the upkeep they have, upkeep within the campus, technical issues, the dorms, the campus grounds. Like, there's so many costs that colleges have to pay consistently to, maintain their image, to maintain quality, to maintain standards, and it all really adds up. Then you also have issues like the pandemic, which also really slowed enrollment, as well as technical glitches. So actually in 2023 to 2024, that school year, FAFSA, which is the financial aid system, that's how people can get loans and financial aid for school, that actually had a glitch. And that glitch actually really affected a lot of colleges. It really disrupted the cash flow for a lot of these colleges. And then you have other, community colleges. So again, going back to small colleges, there was Eastern Gateway Community College. They actually did a free college program, but they did not have the funds to upkeep that kind of, program. Like, it's great. Free college sounds great in theory, but then when you can't pay the bills just to keep the lights on, if you can't pay your faculty, then that's not going to sustain a college. So again, like I said, this is nothing new. This isn't like something that's happened over the past 5 years since the pandemic or since Gen Z's grown up. This has been consistent for many, many years. Post-secondary enrollment has actually dropped since 2010. It's dropped about 8%. And according to the National Student Clearinghouse data, there's still over 1 million empty seats on campuses today that were filled 5 years ago, which is really crazy. So this is what we call an enrollment dip, or sometimes called an enrollment cliff. And when there's an enrollment cliff, that means colleges have fewer tuition dollars a year. And that's really due to changing, I think, sentiments. Less people are going to college, so less money is coming in. We also have to factor in just student debt as well. Student debt, I think, has become a little bit more of a deterrent or a conversation. Now Americans owe in total about $1.6 trillion in student loans. That's as of mid-2024. So that's 42% more than a decade ago. And the average person owes about $37,000 to $38,000 in student loan debt, which is a lot to carry into your adult life and to basically be present throughout your life. I actually know a couple family members who still are paying student debt from like the 80s, the 90s. I mean, that's insane. So student debt alone has really become a national crisis. It's really become a huge conversation, especially all over social media. There's been a lot more loan forgiveness programs and different forms you can fill out and stuff like that. I haven't looked into that too much, but I have seen that, and I have known actual people who've been able to use those and get their debt shrunk down a lot or even completely expunged. So that's really great for them. But I think still, for the most part, most people are still dealing with a lot of debt. So this kind of goes into Gen Z's sentiments on college. I'm going to specifically talk about Gen Z here, and I'm also going to contrast it with millennials and boomers. So for example, Gen Z actually has said, about 51% of Gen Z college grads have said that their degree was not worth it and that it was a waste of money. And you can contrast that with 41% of millennials said that, and 20% of boomers have said that. So it's really crazy that over half of Gen Z is saying their degree has not been worth it. So I actually want to give some real world perspective as well. So I actually want to cite one of my good friends, Brandon, aka School Principal Reacts on YouTube. Go check out his channel. It's really entertaining. So basically on his channel, he watches shows that have episodes that usually involve schooling or anything regarding like school or the institution of learning. And he gives his perspective as a principal or as an administrator. And it's actually really interesting. And I learned a lot about the school system just by watching his videos. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out his channel. But yeah, I actually got him to provide some like real world perspective and some real world dialogue concerning the sentiments of college and the outlook that students have nowadays. And something he said I thought was really interesting. He mentioned that a lot of students, or a lot of like high school seniors, upperclassmen, really don't understand the college admissions process. They don't really understand how college goes so much. They know that it's important. They know that they need a degree. They know that, you know, it's good for them, but they're not necessarily evaluating the value of a degree. That kind of thing they're not really evaluating. They're not thinking super hard into the cost. They know it's expensive, but it's not something they're super clocked into. And I actually think I can corroborate that, because when I went to college, when it was time for me to apply, I remember like not really knowing anything. I remember my dad was like, good luck, apply for whatever you want, like whatever, like, you know, he had his preferences for me, but like for the most part, I was kind of on my own. And I think that is how it is for a lot of people. Once you get to that stage, when you get to your senior year, you know, you have guidance counselors helping you, you have your teachers maybe taking some time out of class to explain certain things, but for the most part, it really is on your own and through your own exploration, through your own diving in. And I think it's a pretty fascinating thing. So it's honestly not that surprising to me. So they don't have much of a frame of reference. So how can you evaluate if something is really worth it if you haven't like been in college yet? Maybe you have siblings or cousins or whoever who've been in college, but you've never experienced it yourself. So it's hard to establish the value of it or figure it out preemptively if you haven't experienced it. Then we have diminishing returns. So according to Pew Research, 49% of Americans now say that getting a college degree really won't guarantee you a good job. And 29% actually say that the price of a degree is not worth the debt it brings. So I also asked Brandon about this as well. And he basically said that students, you know, before they go to college, they recognize that college is expensive, but not necessarily that it's not worth it or worth it per se. It's more like they've accepted the price tag as part of the process. You know, it's like, I think for the most part, everyone knows that college is expensive. Like, I don't think it's something that people, you know, are really just like constantly tripping over. I mean, people, yes, like obviously are not okay with how expensive college is. I'm not okay with how expensive it is. Like, clearly that's a problem, but I feel like for most people, it seems like they've just accepted that, hey, like if I want to go to college, I already know I'm gonna have to drop a bag. I already know I'm gonna have to take a loan. Like that goes without saying. It's like the financial aspect of it is not as pressing, or it doesn't deter people as much. That's what he said from his perspective as a principal. So, and the students that he's talked to. So it's very interesting to hear that perspective. So I will say culturally, even though college isn't seen as like a, oh, whatever, screw college, it has lost more of its must-have status. And me and Brandon, we were talking about this, or he expressed this to me that, you know, back when he graduated high school in the late 90s and early 2000s, it was like, if you didn't go to college, you were a loser, you were a weirdo. I feel like even when I was going to school, that was still kind of the sentiment. I graduated in 2016. I started my freshman year in 2016. I feel like that was still sort of the sentiment back then as well, that you kind of had to go to college. I think community college was more championed though. I think there was more encouragement to go to community college if you really weren't sure, if you really weren't financially able to. Honestly, looking back, like, I don't regret going to college at all. I had a good college experience. I made some really great friends that I'm still friends with to this day. I grew a lot as a person. I mean, I don't regret going to college at all, but I kind of wish I went to community college first because I did not know what I was doing. I changed my major twice. I changed my actual career path like 5 times before I landed on what I'm doing now. So I'm a UX designer. That literally took like, that literally took 6 years to figure out. So like I found UX in 2021. I got to college in 2016. So it took me 5 years. No shade to myself, you know, it takes some time, right? But like, I think about the money I could have saved or saved my dad, because, you know, he was paying, thank God. Thank you, Dad, for the money you were paying for me to go to college. Because I'm like, man, I probably should have just went to community college instead of wasting money on a 4-year in the beginning. It's just interesting, like, you know, the whole 2-year in community college and transfer to a 4-year. If I could go back in time, that's probably what I would have done. So a recent survey reported by universitybusiness.com said that for young adults 18 to 30, they found that 83% agreed that learning a skilled trade can be a better path to financial security than a 4-year college degree, which is a lot. 83% is a lot of children, a lot of people. It's a lot of people that believe that. The fact that they feel a trade is better. But also, I also think that not everyone can do a trade, you know? Like, the one thing about trades is that I think a lot of trades are pretty demanding on the body. And I don't know if everyone has the stamina to do a trade for like the rest of their lives, right? Like that's just something I think about in terms of trades, is like the actual feasibility of them long term. There's lots of people where they can do it forever and it's great for them, but you know, is that the way for everyone? No, but it is a viable option. So Gen Z teens are a little less college focused as well. About 74% of Gen Z teens say they plan to go to college, which is 11 percentage points lower than the college going intentions of teens a decade ago. So I'm guessing like a decade ago would be like my generation when we were going to college. Yeah, so that's dropped a bit. I still think 74% is still a big number, but the fact that it has gone down about 10% is kind of crazy. So I was talking about trades. I started getting a little bit into that. Now this kind of brings me to talking about alternative pathways, such as boot camps and all kinds of stuff. So Brandon also gave me a lot of perspective with this. But for example, coding boot camps. Coding boot camps have skyrocketed a lot. In 2023 alone, 65,900 students graduated from a coding boot camp, which is 12% increase from the year before. And boot camps offer focused practical training in months, not years. And a lot of bootcamp grads do find jobs after graduation. Nowadays, that's a lot harder. I am someone who graduated from a bootcamp. I graduated from a UX design bootcamp from Career Foundry in 2022. Even back then, the job market was a little hard, but I found a job really quickly. But nowadays, like, it's really hard to find a job, which a lot of people who finish bootcamp, some people just give up on it altogether because they can't seem to find a job. And that's really, really difficult for people. So, but I mean, it's still an avenue that a lot of people are going in to kind of boost their applications, to boost their degree already. You know, if they have a degree, they add that certification on top. There's also Google certificates. There's, you know, that offer in like IT support, data analytics, UX design, all kinds of different fields that you can get to just get the knowledge you need, just to get the practical understanding. Ultimately, you still want to get real world experience. I think that's the #1 deterrent for a lot of graduates, at least especially in my field as a designer. Like, real world experience is very paramount. And I remember that was something I was really afraid of because my bootcamp didn't offer any real world jobs, you know, to do any case studies on. But I think what's really important is you display that you can do the skills. I think ultimately companies want to see that you can do the skills and you can reason properly and you can explain your design decisions, all kinds of stuff. But yes, that path is definitely very, very strong right now. And it's very, very prevalent, way more than it was even 7-8 years ago. I also want to reference Brandon. He mentioned that there's been so many different boot camps for tech, mechanics. He even mentioned welding, which I thought was really interesting. He also says he thinks the education system has done a better job in recent years at trying to align what is offered with what industry demands want and potential employees. And because of this, there are a lot more options available in terms of certificate programs that lead to near guaranteed employment without college. And he also gave an anecdote of a student he knew that, you know, instantly went into the Army to become an Army medic after college. And so there's a lot of different pathways and avenues for people that are opening up that were not there 10, 15, 20 years ago.
And so there was a student who had dropped out and had been really, really troubled and was constantly getting in trouble. And he came up to me shortly before we were going to march onto the graduation field. And I really enjoyed speaking with him. I won't say his name, but I hadn't seen him in some time because He had been put out because of some poor choices that he made at an athletic event. I won't go into that, but he came up to me and said that he had spoken to Army recruiters and had been accepted and wanted to be, I think he said, a medic, a combat medic or something like that. And I was so proud of him for that. Oftentimes, students who do struggle, just being able to make a goal and see that goal as a potential reality is so important. And I will mention the military. We do talk about military service a lot as a very valuable option. And I've seen a lot of students that have gone that route, particularly those that may have struggled in other areas. They've really flourished in the military. We have plenty of other students that have not struggled and have chosen military service as an option. I think it is a valuable option that students should consider.
There's also a survey done, also reported by universitybusiness.com, that 62% of high school students said they're open to something other than a four-year college degree, and that apprenticeships have also been growing a lot as well. Again, going back to boot camps, a lot of these boot camps offer a job guarantee. My boot camp was one of those. However, there are a lot of stipulations with job guarantees. I encourage that if you're one of those people that's thinking of doing a tech boot camp, you really should look into the job guarantees, because at least for the boot camp that I did, there was kind of a lot of different stipulations you had to consider. Like, you had to do a lot of different things in order to actually get your money back. So just wanted to put that out there. And you know, the way they measure these statistics, they'll measure it based off not just if you got a job, but let's say if you got an internship, that's counting as, oh, you got a job, right? Like, oh, that's part of our statistics. Like, oh yeah, 90-something% of people get jobs after they finish this program, when really for some people it was just an internship. It wasn't actually a full-time job. So just, you know, be wary of that. I do think boot camps are worth it. As someone who's done a boot camp, I do think it's worth it. By the way, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, by the way, I love talking about my path with like boot camps and tech and stuff like that. So if you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll put my LinkedIn on the screen and connect if you're interested. I don't know. I need to network more. I want to network more, so putting it out there. Okay, let's keep going. So now we're going to get into workforce impacts and economic implications. So for one, I think because of the changing landscape and people going the non-traditional route, a lot of boot camps and different opportunities opening up, a lot of companies are now requiring more skill-based, like they're hiring based on skill more than degree. So ZipRecruiter actually in 2023, only 14.5% of their job listings required a degree, and that's down from 18% from the previous year. So there's a lot more skills-based hiring where, okay, we want to know your skill, we want to know if you can do X, Y, and Z, you don't need a degree. And even big companies like Google, IBM, Bank of America, they have a lot of roles where they're not really requiring a college degree like they used to. But I do think that the caveat of this sort of skills-based hiring is, I think there becomes the matter of experience, right? So if they want to know, okay, you're not having a degree, but we want to see you have experience. And a lot of these entry-level jobs, like they're like, hey, you need 8 years of experience. And it's kind of like, I just got out of college, or I just like finished this program. How do I have 8 years of experience? How are you expecting me to have all this experience? And I think especially with the job market now, it's really choked, you know, especially with a lot of these layoffs that have been happening in the government. So it's like, you know, there's a lot more competition nowadays. I think there's also pressures on colleges to reform, even though, again, like I said, it's not like colleges are completely on the decline and they're completely, you know, done for. Obviously not, but there has been a steady decline. And I do think it has pushed colleges to need to evolve, right? They need to evolve with the times. They need to be able to offer the skill set needed in these industries. They need to evolve all their programs across multiple industries. I feel like I've been talking a lot about tech because, you know, tech boot camps have boomed so much, but even across other industries as well. And we've also heard of colleges collaborating with different boot camps, different courses on like Udemy or Coursera or whatever the case may be, you know, to keep up with this demand of evolving, I guess, landscape and requirements. I also think the interesting thing about a lot of Gen Zers choosing to not go the traditional route could be that it's possible that you could start off your life with less debt. You're not starting with as much debt because you didn't go through college to do whatever. And so now you're starting with a little less debt. However, I do think the pitfall of that is the fact that you're not always starting with as much earnings. I mean, some people are very lucky to make a lot of money out of school. You know, they're lucky to make a lot of money as soon as they even finish high school, depending on like what trade they did or what apprenticeship they did. But for a lot of people, that may not always be the case. And so even though you don't have as much debt, you don't have as much earnings to really be able to kind of match the flow of the economy and inflation right now. I think the effects of people going more non-traditional routes or of colleges closing down is that it can really affect communities. Because let's say a community college closes down in your town. That's tons of jobs. That's tons of people that are out of a job. That's also less business for local shops. So I think about, if that were to close down, they would definitely lose a lot of business. But I do think the benefit of trade programs increasing is that this can also support businesses that might need those types of workers. Like this helps boost local industries. So for example, if we have more people going into apprenticeships for construction, then that can really alleviate shortages that you experience in the construction field and other fields as well, like maybe electricians or whatever other fields. That can really help boost those different industries. So again, to kind of wrap this up, I think, based off of the statistics I shared and the different anecdotes I shared, higher education has definitely suffered a lot in terms of its outlook. Once college was seen as the end all be all, you have to go to college, and now there's a lot more opportunities. I think also with just institutional complacency, misappropriating funds, just being straight up ridiculous, just being crazy, like just not handling things, not doing your business properly, that's led to a lot. That's led to a lot of closures and other, impacts to the higher education system. But I think, again, the converse effect that is good is that it has opened up all these opportunities. There are a lot more paths to go down. It's not just an isolated, you just go pick a couple fields, 1, 2, 3, 4, doctor, lawyer, teacher, whatever the case may be. There's so many different options. Like what I'm doing now, I did not know existed when I was in undergrad, when I was a high school student. If I had found out about my career path back then, I probably would have done it way back then. So I think going forward, when it comes to the future of at least higher education, I think we're going to keep seeing a more pluralistic approach to finding your way and finding your path in life. It's not just isolated to one path. I think universities are going to need to continue to evolve. They're going to need to continue to provide value that is actually very tangible for people, to not feel like they're wasting their money, to not feel like they are, going to college and not really getting the proper resources they need to find a job in their field and things like that. I also think that what's happening right now and what will continue happening in the future, possibly for Gen Alpha, is like evaluating, okay, like college is still kind of a primary option, but what about this? What about maybe a boot camp? What about doing this instead? What about, deferring this? Like there's all kinds of different options now. And I'm so I wish that this was a thing when I was starting school. Like I feel like I was off by just a few years. Like if I was born maybe 3 to 5 years later, I'd be in a very different position. Well, would I be? I don't know. Doesn't matter. My life went the way it went for a reason, but I think it would have been really cool to have these different options now. But I do think that if higher ed does end up collapsing in the future, I think what's happening now is it brings a really good opportunity to rebuild and to rethink and to reshape the higher education system, to be a system that has a higher ROI, to be a system that really prepares people for the future, for the real world. And I do think that even though things are really shaky in our economy right now, in our world right now, very, very crazy times we're living in, but I do think there is a glimmer of hope in these more expansive fields. I think young people in that respect are in a better position in terms of having more opportunities and it not being so stigmatized if you decide not to go to college right away. But yeah, let me know what y'all think. Let me know what y'all think about this trend of colleges, closing, a lot of smaller universities, kind of your sentiments about college. Are you happy you went to college? Is college still worth it? I asked on my poll, on my community tab the other week, I was like, is college still worth it? And 2.6 thousand people voted, and I believe 50% voted yes. I don't remember the number, but a lot of you voted that it's still very worth it. I also agree as well, especially if you have an understanding of your interests and where you want to go and what you want to do. I think it definitely can be worth it if you go into it with more of a plan. But yeah, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I hope you guys enjoyed my take on this, and I'll see y'all in the next one.